Hi friends, this is me Payal Dutta. Welcome to my channel. If you are new to my channel, ding dong, please don't forget to subscribe. Today we will be doing the story The Elevator by William Sleator. So without much delay, let us start with the line by line explanation. It was an old building with an old elevator. So the story it begins with the setting. It was an old building and the elevator, that is the lift, that too was old. A very small elevator. So this elevator, it was very compact. It was small, which could carry only 3 people. So the space inside this elevator, it was very limited. Now we come across the protagonist of our story, the central character. Martin, a thin 12-year-old. So he was young. He was only 12-year-old. And mark his physical features. He was thin and he felt nervous in it. In it means inside the elevator. How did he feel? He felt very nervous. So he was not brave. So these terms you must remember, because in this story the author, he is actually trying to tell us that how different Martin was from the stereotypical men, the type of men the society wants. So Martin, see, he was thin and he was not brave. But in the society, we know that boys are supposed to be strong. They are supposed to be brave. So the author, he has created a protagonist who is neither very strong, nor is he brave, nor is he courageous. So Martin, when he went inside this elevator, from the very first day, they moved into the apartment. That is, they entered to live in that old building, that old flat. So from the very first day they started living inside that apartment, Martin, he felt nervous. He felt scared inside the elevator. And whom did he live with? He lived with his father. Of course, he was always uncomfortable in elevators. So, you see, Martin, he had this claustrophobia. Claustrophobia means that he had this fear of being in closed places. So, he was a claustrophobic person, a claustrophobic boy who feared to be in closed places, and this elevator was very small. It was compact, and so he felt nervous from the very first day they moved into the apartment. He was always uncomfortable in elevators. That is, whenever he went inside these closed places, he felt very uncomfortable. He felt very uneasy, very much worried. He felt upset, afraid that they would fall. So he feared, he was afraid that they means the elevator would fall. It would drop down. It would collapse. But this one was especially unpleasant. So this particular elevator of this apartment, it was extremely, unusually, especially unpleasant. It was frightening. Perhaps this was because of the poor lighting. So inside this elevator, the lighting, it was very poor. So the light, it was deficient. It was dull, it was poor. And the dirty walls. The walls of the elevator, they were not clean, they were dirty. Perhaps it was because of the door. which never stayed open long enough. So the doors of this elevator, it slammed. It slammed means it banged noisily when it shut, with a loud clanging noise. Clanging noise means when the noise is very sharp, like it is a deafening sound. It is so loud and sharp. So here the author is telling that this elevator, it was so much frightening because of the poor lighting, because of the unclean walls, because the door it slammed with a loud noise. Perhaps it was the way the elevator shuddered each time it left a floor. So from every time the elevator moved from one floor to another, the elevator, because it was old, it shuddered. Shuddered means it shaked, as if it was exhausted. Exhausted means it was broken down, like its time is over, it is worn out. And so it used to shake. Maybe it was simply too small. Maybe this elevator, it was just too little, too small. It was undersized. It seemed crowded even with only 2 people in it. So when 2 people entered this elevator, it seemed crowded. It was so small. Crowded means it seemed packed. It seemed overfilled. It seemed overpopulated. So you even have stairs in this old house. The stairs were no better. So even though you have stairs, the stairs of this old building were just like the elevator. It was equally bad. The condition was not good. Martin tried them. Martin had tried the stairs one day after school. So he returned from school, and instead of taking the elevator, he took the stairs. There were no windows and the lights were not working. So there was no air, no proper ventilation in the stairs. There were no windows. So you have no light coming in, no air. And the lights were not working. That is the artificial lights. They were not working at all. So it was dark. Martin's footsteps echoed behind him on the cement. So as Martin, he ascended the stairs, what happened? The steps, his own footsteps, they echoed. That is, they repeated behind him on the cement. The cement means the steps of the stairs, they were made of cement. So he could hear his own footsteps as though there was another person climbing. So it felt as if someone else was following him. Someone else was climbing, ascending the stairs. And it seemed that person was getting closer. That person was getting nearer to Martin. By the time he reached his home on the 17th floor, so Martin lived on the 17th floor. He was gasping for breath. He was gasping. Gasping means he was panting. He was panting for air because remember, the stairs, you had no windows, so the stairs were choking. And moreover, Martin, he was scared because he heard the sound of echo, as if someone was following him to his home. And so he was out of breath. He was scared and he reached his home breathless. And as we know, he lived with his father. So Martin's father worked at home. He wanted to know why Martin was out of breath. So when Martin reached his home from school, his father saw that Martin, he was panting. And he wanted to know the reason why Martin was breathless. "Why don't you take the elevator?" he asked, frowning at Martin. So he was frowning, he was unhappy, he was displeased with Martin. Why? Because Martin did not take the elevator. Instead, he took the stairs. "You are not only skinny and weak and bad at sports." So see, he is pointing out all the weakness in Martin. These are not weaknesses, but the society feels that these are the weaknesses of a boy. A boy cannot be skinny, a boy cannot be weak, a boy cannot be bad at sports. So his father is, as if his father is telling that you are skinny, that is, you are spare, you are bony, you are weak, and you are bad at sports. Bad at sports means you are not athletic. So a boy, according to the stereotypical society, must be strong, muscular, brave, courageous. And Martin, he was lacking in all these qualities. His face seemed to say, that is, his father's face, his father's expression seemed to criticize Martin. "But you are also a coward, that is, you are not even courageous." After that, Martin always took the elevator. So all the societal pressure, his father's anger, his father's displeasure, that forced Martin to use the elevator. He did not use the stairs again. He would have to get used to it. Used to it means he had to become accustomed to it. He told himself as if he had no other option. Just like he got used to being bullied at school. So just the way he got habituated in being teased at school, he had to accustom himself to use the elevator. But he didn't get used to it. So he couldn't adjust himself in that surrounding. He was always afraid that it would stop suddenly and he would be trapped inside it for hours by himself. So he had this fear in him that one day what would happen? He would be in the elevator and the elevator would suddenly stop and there would be no one inside to rescue him. So this was his fear. But it wasn't much better when there were other passengers. So when you had other people who accompanied him inside the lift, even then it wasn't better. The presence of others didn't comfort him either. You see, he was bullied in school, scolded at home by his father. So he did not like to socialize much. He didn't like to be close to them, to be near to anybody else. He also disliked the way people tried hard not to look at one another. So he did not like the fact that when people entered the elevator and they tried hard, that is, they struggled not to look at each other. What did they do then? They stared at nothing. So they had a vacant look in their face. They gazed at nothing. They did not look at each other. The passengers did not make any conversation. So one morning what happened? One morning the elevator stopped at the 14th floor. Now, you know Martin, he used to live in the 17th floor. So now on morning the elevator, it stopped at the 14th floor. And a fat lady got on. A fat lady came inside. She was wearing an old green coat that ballooned around her. Ballooned means she was fat, and this coat of hers, it made her look more spherical. It increased her size. It was like a balloon, like a sphere, that coat. And as she waddled into the elevator, waddled means she walked inside the Elevator with small steps because she was old. Waddled means we usually use the term waddled with a duck. So this lady, she walked inside the elevator like a duck with small steps. And Martin was sure he felt it sink under her weight. So Martin, when he saw the lady wearing this green coat that was ballooned around her, what did he feel? That the coat, it disappeared under her weight. It sinked under her weight. So she was so fat. She was so big that her coat brushed against him. It brushed against Martin. Brushed means it touched him. It came in contact with him. And he had to squeeze himself because the elevator, it was compact. So that is why, and this lady, she was fat. So Martin, he had to compress himself. Press himself in the corner. Into the corner of the elevator. So the space that was limited, it was restricted, and so Martin had to manage and stand inside. There was no room for anybody else. So no room means there was no space. So if someone else had to come in, they wouldn't be able to enter the elevator. The elevator was full. The door closed quickly behind her, behind that fat lady. And instead of facing it, that is, instead of facing the door, what did the lady do? She turned around and stared at Martin. Instead of looking at any other place, she looked at Martin and kept staring at him, glaring at him. She gazed at Martin. He looked at her face for a moment. That is, Martin looked at her because she was gazing at him. She had large fleshy cheeks. Fleshy cheeks means she had chubby cheeks. Her cheeks were filled with muscles and fat. And no chin. She had no chin. So you see, she was overweight. And here you have thin Martin, who is standing in the corner. Just a huge mass, a heavy mass, as if she's filled with fats of neck. Her neck was so much fatty, it was so chubby that you don't have a chin. Her blue eyes were tiny. They were small but sharp. That is, she was very alert and she was very attentive. They seemed to be boring into Martin's face. Boring means they seemed to drill into Martin's face as if she was piercing a hole and observing Martin's face. Martin looked away. He felt uncomfortable. And I told you, he did not like to socialize. So what did he do? He looked away. He turned away. But the woman didn't turn around. Was she still looking at him? So because Martin looked away, he wondered that whether this woman, she's still observing him or not. And so what did he do? He glanced at her quickly. So he looked at her for a few seconds and again he looked away. Again he started ignoring her, avoiding her. She was still watching him. That is, the lady, she kept on observing Martin. She did not remove her eyes. He wanted to close his eyes. He wanted to turn around and stare into the corner. He was afraid. He didn't want to see the lady anymore. But how could he? The lady was present in the elevator along with him. So he couldn't ignore her completely. The elevator creaked down. So the elevator, now it is making a sound because it is old and it is descending to 12, then 11. So they are coming down. The elevator is coming downwards. 12, then 11. These are the floors. The piggy eyes was still looking at him. So this woman, she had piggy eyes. Piggy eyes means eyes that are greedy, that are hungry. They are hungry to know more, as if the eyes they want to learn more about Martin. She had to be crazy. Why else would she stare at him like that? So maybe she was mad. That is why she kept on looking at Martin in such a way. What was she going to do next? So what was her upcoming plans? Why was she staring at him like that? All these questions, they arose in Martin's mind. He was afraid. But she did nothing. She only watched him. She only observed Martin. And what did she see? That Martin was breathing loudly. He was afraid and he was panting in fear until the elevator reached the first floor at last. So finally what happened? The lift, it reached the first floor. Until then, Martin was breathless. Martin wanted to run past her, to get out. Run past her means he wanted to draw her attention. He wanted to inform her that I want to get out. But there was no room, there was no space for him to exit. What could he only do? He could only wait as she turned and moved slowly out into the lobby. So Martin, he had to wait for this lady to leave the elevator because there was no space for him to leave. And then this lady, she walked out into the lobby. The lobby is the entrance hall of the apartment. Then he ran. So he was frightened, he was afraid, and so he ran. He didn't care what she thought. He did not give attention. He neglected what this lady thought about his running. He was afraid, and so he ran nearly all the way to school. He was so much panic-stricken. He was full of fear. And then when he went to school, he thought about her, that is this fat lady, all day. So throughout the day in school, he was thinking about what took place in the elevator. But did she live in the building? So was she a resident? He had never seen her before. So this lady was unknown to him. And the building was not very big. So there were limited residents, and Martin had never seen this lady before. Maybe she was visiting somebody, maybe she was someone's guest. But 7:30 in the morning was too early for visiting. So then Martin thought that if she is a guest, she might be a guest. But to come and visit someone, to see someone at 7:30, that doesn't sound so reasonable. And then what happened? Martin felt nervous when he got back to the building after school. So after school, Martin, he returned back home. And again, when he reached the building, he felt nervous. He felt scared. He felt like a cat on hot bricks. But why should he be afraid of an old lady? So an old lady must be inferior. And Martin, he was 12. So he is telling himself that why should I fear an old lady? He felt ashamed of himself. He felt sorry for himself. He was embarrassed. So you see, the society, it conditions people to believe that an old lady is weak and you cannot be afraid of someone who is old. If you are afraid of someone who is old, you must feel ashamed of yourself. And then Martin pressed the button and stepped into the elevator. He entered the elevator to reach the 17th floor where he lived, hoping that it would not stop, that the elevator would not stop at any floor, but it stopped on the 3rd floor. Martin watched the door slide open. So the doors of the elevator, it was movable. So it slid open, revealing a green coat. So what did it display? What did it reveal? It exhibited a green coat, a piggish face, a greedy face, and blue eyes, which were already staring at him, which were already looking at Martin, as if she knew he would be there, as if she was waiting for Martin to return from school. It wasn't possible. So that is, it was impossible, it was unimaginable that she would be waiting for him. It was like a nightmare, it was like a bad dream for Martin. But there she was. Going up? Said Martin. So are you going upstairs? His voice little more than a squeak. A squeak means a cry, a high-pitched cry. And she nodded. She agreed that yes, I am going up. And she stepped on. She walked inside the elevator. The door slammed. It banged again. He watched her pudgy hand. Her pudgy means her fat hands, her chubby hands, move towards the buttons of the lift. And she pressed. Not 14, but 18, the top floor. So earlier she had got up from the 14th floor, but now she is going up to the 18th floor, the top floor. The elevator trembled, it shaked and began to go up, and the lift began to ascend. The fat lady watched him. Again she is observing Martin. This morning she got on at the 14th floor. So why did she get on at the 3rd floor today and go up the 18th? So all these questions are coming in Martin's mind. The elevator seemed to be moving more slowly than usual. So Martin felt that the time inside the elevator, it wasn't passing at all. It was passing very slowly. Martin wanted to press 7 so that he could get out and walk up the stairs. But he couldn't reach the buttons without touching her, and he didn't want to do that. So Martin, he just wanted to escape from that atmosphere. He wanted to leave the lift, but if he did so, he would have to touch the lady. He had to contact her. And he didn't want to touch her at all. When the elevator stopped on his floor, that is the 17th floor, she hardly moved out of his way. So the lady, she did not give much space for Martin to leave the elevator. He had to squeeze past her. He had to press himself in order to exit, rubbing against her horrible scratchy coat. So touching her scratchy coat, her rough coat, Martin had to make his way. He was afraid the door would close before he could get out. She turned and watched him as the door slammed shut. Now she knows I live on 17th, he thought. So Martin, now he is feeling insecure. He's feeling insecure because the lady knows in which floor he lives. And now maybe he has to encounter her every day. So he is very afraid. Have you ever noticed a strange lady in the elevator? He asked his father that evening. So he is inquiring from his father. Have you seen that lady? Can't say I have, he replied, not looking away from the television. So his father is not interested in what Martin has to say. He lacks that compassion that he has to give his son. He is not concerned about what his son has to say. And Martin knew he was probably making a mistake. A mistake in maybe judging the lady, a mistake by telling his father what had happened because his father wouldn't understand. But he had to tell somebody. He had to express his thoughts about the woman. She was in the elevator with me twice today. She just kept staring at me. She never stopped looking at me for a minute. So he told his father whatever took place. And just see his heartless father's reaction. What are you so worried about now? So what is troubling you? His father said, turning impatiently away from the television. Impatiently means he was irritated by Martin. What am I going to do with you, Martin? Honestly, now you're afraid of some poor old lady? Poor means a very inferior and a weak old lady. A weak old lady is making you afraid. This is so annoying. I'm not afraid. You are afraid, said the father. See, he is so thoughtless. When are you going to grow up and act like a man? So this is what the story is actually trying to tell us. That how a person should be in order to be accepted as a man in the society. You cannot be afraid. Are you going to be timid all your life? Timid means are you going to be afraid all your life? Martin didn't want to cry in front of his father, so he waited until he got to his room. So Martin, he waited for his father to leave and then he would cry. His father probably knew he was crying. He was aware that Martin was crying anyway, but he slept very little. He took a nap. He did not go to comfort Martin. So you see, this is also a social conditioning that men, you are not allowed to cry in front of the public. That is, boys don't cry. They have to be courageous. So in the morning, when the elevator door opened, the fat lady was waiting for him in the lift. And Martin, he stood there. He was waiting outside the lift, unable to move. He was frozen with fear. Then backed away. When he restored his senses, he withdrawed. He moved back. As she saw him, as this old lady saw Martin, her expression, her look, it changed. She smiled and the door slammed. So again, the doors of the lift, it slammed. Martin started running down the stairs. He was so afraid. The stairs were dark. There were no windows, no lights. And that is why Martin, in his hurry, he fell down. His father was silent on the way to the hospital, so he was injured. Disappointed and angry with him. He was upset, he was sad, he was annoyed with Martin for being a coward and a fool, for being weak, for being a loser. A fool means a loser, for being silly. Martin had broken a leg and needed to walk on crutches. He could not use the stairs now. That is, he could not climb the stairs anymore. Was that why the fat lady had smiled? Did she know what would happen? So again, questions are coming in Martin's mind. At least his father was with him in the elevator on the way back from the hospital. So this gave Martin a sense of security. There was no room for the fat lady to get in. And if she did, his father would see her, would encounter her. And maybe he would understand why Martin was so afraid so long. When he got home, he could stay in the apartment for a few days. That is, he was supposed to be in complete rest. He was not allowed to go to school. The doctor said that he had to take rest. He needed some relaxation as much as possible. Martin felt quite safe from the fat lady now. He was protected. He felt sheltered in his house. Oh, I almost forgot. His father reached out and pressed number 9. So his father, he reached out the buttons of the lift and he pressed the 9th number. That is, he wanted to go to the 9th floor. What are you doing? Asked Martin, trying not to sound afraid. So he was trying, see, he was pretending. He was trying to show that he is courageous. He was pretending to be a man. And his father says that I promised to Mrs. Ullman, to visit Mrs. Ullman. That is, I have promised to see her, said his father, looking at his watch as he stepped out of the elevator. Let me go with you. I want to visit her too, Martin pleaded. So Martin begged that I too want to see her, struggling to move on his crutches. So he was trying hard to move because he was injured. But the door was already closing. Afraid to be in the elevator alone, said his father. Grow up, Martin. So he's always disappointed with his son. So he's telling that you're afraid of being in the elevator alone. That is why you want to accompany me. And the door slammed shut. So Martin, he is inside the elevator, and his father, he has left. Martin hobbled to the buttons. He hobbled means he walked to the buttons. He was limping. And he pressed 9. That is, I want to get down on the 9th floor. But it didn't do any good. The elevator stopped at 10. So the elevator had already started by the time he pressed the button, where the fat lady was waiting for him. So the elevator stopped at 10, and again this lady, he was waiting for Martin. She moved in quickly, and he was too slow to get past her in time to get out. And again this lady comes inside the elevator, and Martin, he is injured, and that is why he is slow and he cannot leave her. He cannot get past her. He cannot get her out of the way and leave the elevator. The door closed and the elevator began to move. Hello, Martin, said the lady. And she laughed as if she is mocking Martin, as if she is humiliating him, and pushed the stop button. So remember, Martin, he feared that the elevator would stop and he would be trapped inside. So here you see his fear has come true. There is a fulfillment of his fear. So from this we can say that this old lady, she might be an illusion that is representing Martin's fear. So this stop button, it is like that it is an end to Martin's fear. That is, he has faced his fear so many times that his fear is almost gone. It has stopped. You see, when this building had limited residents, his father, Martin's father, he never met this lady. So this lady, she is actually not real, but someone who Martin, he hallucinates. He hallucinates because he imagines, because he has this fear that he will be trapped and there will be no one to rescue him. And one more thing you should see, that Martin was skinny and the lady was chubby. So you have the societal norms that is showing that a young boy must be courageous and an old person must be weak. And then this shows that this lady, she was humiliating Martin at the end. At the end of the story, we see that Martin's fear is over. The stop button has played its part. And this reminds us of what Mark Twain said, that courage is resistance to fear. And Martin, he had mastered that. So with this, I come to an end of today's explanation. If you have any doubt regarding this story, you can ask me in the comment section below. I will definitely answer. And please do subscribe to my channel, and I keep uploading videos on the updated syllabus. So you may please subscribe. So till then, ta-da!